Lesson 8, the woman as a spiritual person. Women are not just wives and mothers. They are first and foremost the Khalifas of Allah on this earth. You are living models of the great religion, but one this is unfortunately associated with terrorism, radicalism, and violence. It is your responsibility to wipe out all this prejudice. Just as you are being out there in your hijab, your modesty, your good relations with your neighbor, just people seeing the way you eat, the way you sit, the way you smile, this is what will make things change. This was from the speech of Merve Kavkal, the Turkish MP, when she came to visit London. We're going to think about the woman as a spiritual person, how her faith affects her life. The notes you have in Lesson 9 will give you the background to remind us of what Muslims believe and practice. It is especially helpful to look at the chart, which is in columns of beliefs and practices and living faith, how Islam sometimes is actually lived. Just briefly, we want to remind ourselves of the 5 main beliefs: a belief in the oneness of God, a monotheistic faith, and a belief in angels, especially giving great honor to Gabriel, a belief in prophets with Muhammad, the last and final prophet, a belief in the prophet Jesus, but as a human prophet, a belief in the books, especially being the Quran, the final and complete book, and a belief in heaven and hell. And then the practices that you have are listed. To say the creed, there is one God and Muhammad is his messenger. To pray 5 times a day. To fast in the month of Ramadan. To give alms, the zakat. And hopefully possible to go on the Hajj. Now I want to turn to look at them as how a woman's eyes would see these things. A belief in one God often is seen by saying the name of Allah over and over. The Quran challenges us to repeat God's name. And living in North Africa, I usually heard people saying, Allah, Allah, and Dieu, mon Dieu. Most of them included saying the name of God in French, equal to saying Allah. And also, you put God's name up on the walls of your house. And then there were the 99 beads and the rosary to say the 99 names of God. Some people had small ones in which you have 33 instead of 99, or a chain of 99. It's the same. But for many women, it was very important to have a beautiful piece of gold, quite large, and it says Allah, and you wear it all the time. And sometimes they put it on the baby and on the children, and when speaking about God or some problem, they often touched their piece of gold with the name of God. But because the influence of Sufism is very great in there, another day we'll talk more about mysticism, but for many Muslims the effect is that they will use Sufi terminology and speak of, I love God, God is a loving person. This is somewhat, in a sense, contradictory to what we're told in Orthodoxy, that they would not speak this way of God. For most of my Muslim friends, they do not understand that there is something called Orthodoxy. They just believe things about God that might be Orthodoxy, might be popular folk Islam, and might be Sufism. To them, it's all the same. Often when I asked questions to try to grapple with where their understanding came from, what is the source, they said, oh, you've learned wrongly in the West. They told you the wrong things about Islam. They would say, don't read the books, just watch us, learn from us. We are Islam. And I think that's true. You need to read the books, but you need to also, when you meet Muslims, just open your eyes to watch and see how it is lived out. But then there's the belief about angels, and I think for most women, they concentrate on the evil angels and the jinn, rather than think about Gabriel. When I was living in that family, the mother would often go with candles and go around all the rooms and all the little corners to be sure she wished out all the evil spirits day by day. And the belief in Prophet Muhammad is very strong, and he's extremely venerated. There are many songs and hymns written to Muhammad which sound as if they should have been written to the Lord Jesus. Songs that sing to him, "You are the light of my life, you are glorious, you are wonderful, you are high above all." They sound as if they're songs about God, not a human person. The Prophet's birthday is sort of like a Christmas. It's a very special day. And as I've been living in the UK, I found that even the Pakistani Muslim people venerate him even more than I experienced with North Africans. And it is the Sunnah, or the Hadith that we were talking about, that women follow rather than the Quran. So when they train their children to eat, they say, "Eat with your right hand," because Muhammad did. And so their children are brought up to live like Muhammad. And their belief in books and respect for the Quran is great. They will buy the most very special cloth and wrap the book and put it on the highest place, the highest shelf in the house. And they will know the stories even if they don't read it. And many women have been influenced by some of the hadiths that say women will not go to heaven. And so quite often you will have women expressing very real concerns and doubts about how they will get to heaven. But it's the practices that I think you see more of the life and application of Islam. In the creed, when you're born, it is whispered in your right ear, and in some countries your right and your left ear, to say the creed, and that declares you that you are born a Muslim. But then we come to prayer. Pray 5 times a day. Where are you going to pray if you're a woman? Well, primarily you will probably pray at home, but you must pray in a clean place. Well, what is a dirty place then? A dirty place can be like a salty beach, any place that's near something that is called unclean, such as you wouldn't pray near the toilets and the washrooms where there are drains. You don't pray near something or someone that is dead, like a dead animal, a person died. You can't pray there. That place is unclean. When I lived in the family, the grandmother was dying, and they put her in a separate room because they didn't want her to make the whole house unclean during the month of Ramadan. And because I was a Christian, already unclean for not being a Muslim, I sat with the grandmother. But of course I couldn't hold her hand up and hold it so God could see she was a Muslim, because I wasn't one. They went outside in the neighborhood and found an old blind man who wasn't fasting and was unclean, so he could come and not be defiled. It wouldn't hurt him. And so we both sat with her, and he held her hand up for God, and I sat there because I didn't want her to be alone. And everyone in the family prayed she would live till Maghrib, till sundown, so they could come and see her. So also you don't pray in front of the open door, you don't pray in front of a fire, and you don't pray in front of portraits of people and animals. So if you have lots of pictures on the wall, you can't pray where pictures are. And so often what a woman will do is go and wash that area of the floor where she wants to pray to make sure she has a clean place. And if you are poor and live in a one-room flat or a one-room house, you haven't many choices of places. And for that reason, it's very popular to have a prayer mat, so that you always have something lovely and clean to put on the floor to have a clean place to pray. There are many beautiful prayer mats in the market, but a favorite prayer mat is to have the sheepskin from the lamb that you killed at the big feast the year before. So every year you have a sacrifice of a lamb and you have a new prayer rug for the next year. But you wouldn't leave the mat on the floor. You only put it there to pray, then you pick it up and keep it clean. For a few years in London, I worked as a chaplain to Arabic-speaking people in the hospital. One morning in our office, we had a notice from the government saying all public places must provide prayer rooms for Muslim people in London. So our hospital was going to find a room where people could pray. And the other chaplain said to me, "You understand Islam, you do it." So I walked about the hospital with a Muslim friend. We found a small room, and I said, "This is about the right size." And then we said, "But this room, exactly where is it? Opposite this room is the blood bank. Blood is unclean. This is no good." We took a walk on another area of the hospital, and we found a nice room. And we thought, this is really good. Then I thought, well, looking at the plan of the hospital, underneath this room is the morgue, the dead people. Maybe no one will know, but I don't want to deliberately deceive Muslim friends. So finally we found a room near the front door, clear of blood, clear of dead people, so that you just get in the hospital. It's bound to be the cleanest spot before you got near any of the sickness. Well, you can't pray if you don't wash, so we must divide this room and put a small wash basin and so forth so they can wash, and a place to put their shoes, a shoe rack. So I had the carpenter from the hospital fix a shoe rack, and I went and found the plumber to put in the washing basin so they could wash their feet and their hands and their face and all that they needed to do for praying. And after I explained very carefully to the plumber about putting this washing basin very low and exactly how high I wanted it, I went away only to come back and find the sink way up here. And when I saw what he'd done, I said, "This is wrong. You must put it down." He said, "No, you're wrong. You're crazy. Who puts the basin down there?" And I said, "You don't understand. This is a prayer room, and you have to wash your feet. So put it down low enough, or people will kill themselves trying to get their feet washed." But then I thought, everything's ready. We bought a beautiful prayer mat, put that down. We had the place for your shoes. We had the water for washing. Then I suddenly realized that every night the cleaners who were from the Caribbean would come in and walk and make the place unclean. And so I had to arrange for a special hook and a special way to roll up the rug and keep it pure so we could keep the room undefiled. To us it might seem unnecessary, but for a Muslim it is the rules and the externals that count so much. But we haven't even looked at the person. The person too can't pray if they're unclean. And so the woman has to consider whether she's clean and wash and have clean clothes on, and then perform all the washing of the prayer. But there are several things that make the woman unclean. The woman is unclean when she menstruates, after the birth of a child, and perhaps even during the pregnancy if she has any kind of discharge, or if she's touched someone who is dead or a dead animal. And so I had a lovely opportunity to share with one of my friends who was very upset about being unclean. One day when she had put her children to bed, she had triplets and a little girl. So she had 4 small children. And you can have lots of things that go on the floor when you have 4 small children. So she had them all in bed, sound asleep, and she went to take a shower and get her clean clothes in order to pray.
Então, ela tinha...
And she was ready to pray, and she did the special washing, her arms, her nose, her mouth, her hair, her feet, everything ready. And she just sat kneeled to pray when she heard a very funny noise, and one of the children just spit up everywhere all around the floor in front of her. And as she attended to that one, then she realized she had to change dirty nappies of several, and everything was dirty, and she was unclean. It was on her, on them, on the floor. Everything is unclean. No praying can happen. And she began to cry, and she said, "God, women can't come to you until maybe they're 40 or 50, because all those early years, you keep having babies, you keep being unclean, the children get you unclean, you're always unclean. Maybe when I'm 50, I can talk to God." She said, "God, you must hate women. You don't want us to talk to you." Then she said, "I thought, well, I'm going to ask you, God, send Elsie to come and see me. She'll know the answer. And it wasn't in my mind to visit her that day. And as I was waiting for a bus to visit someone else, the bus that goes directly to Nadira's house came. And God said to me, take that bus. And I did. She met me at the door weeping. What can I do? I can't get to God. I'm unclean. I'll never get there. And I shared with her the story of the unclean woman who touched Jesus. Have you seen that story for what it really says as a woman? That woman was sick for 30-some years, went to all the doctors because she was having blood that made her unclean. She could not go to the temple. Most of us have not experienced that. We don't get up thinking, well, I can't go to church this morning because I'm pregnant. I can't go to church because I have my period. We've never experienced being shut out and what that means, perhaps. A number of women have expressed to me that they feel when you're a woman, God shuts the door and you can't come in. And she said, well, that's what I think too. She said, if God sees everything and God can be touched by an unclean woman, then it must be something wrong with what I believe. I must be able to come to God anyway. But we also had an experience, not quite like that, but similar, with a Christian woman. One of my Christian friends from a Muslim background came regularly to the prayer times and to church with her children. But then there were the Sundays she didn't come. And I asked the children, is Mommy sick today? No, Mommy just can't come. After that happened a few times, one of my colleagues said, what's Rahima got? Is something wrong with her? Why she doesn't come? Then I began to think, when are the Sundays she's absent? Yeah. There's a pattern. He doesn't come. I bet it's when she's menstruating. Because in our services we had communion every Sunday. She had read in the Old Testament that when women have their period, they're unclean. It still says so in Leviticus. Since that had never been our personal experience to take that verse in that sense, she took it with her Islamic background that even in Christianity, women still had times of being unclean because the Bible said so. And she didn't know how to take the verses, and she had never asked us because it might be a bit embarrassing. So we had to put some information in our discipleship program about cleanliness and cleanness and uncleanness and what the Bible says, because for them, these are issues. And so perhaps we really, as Christians, need to appreciate the great privilege that we have in Christ, that we can come to him at any time, at any place, no connection with taking baths or washing, that God takes us as we are. The month of fasting and Ramadan is one of the busiest months in the woman's life. You might think if we're fasting and don't eat, don't waste any time cooking, we'll have more free time. But as one of my little Muslim friends, a child, said to me, you just changed the night to day, and night becomes in the morning and day becomes at night. So every night is a feast. Every night is a festival. And you do many things every night that you would have never done non-Ramadan time. And Ramadan means you're fasting from the sun up or the crack of light until the sun goes down, which can be very long. In Britain, one year, it was till 10 o'clock at night, because we have a long day. But before it starts, you have to do the spring clean. You take the whole house apart and clean everything. Because again, we have to have a clean place for the fast. And cleaning the house and getting everything ready can take lots of time. Again, it's the woman who will do all these things. But then they like to start Ramadan by seeing that it's a new month, seeing the new moon in the sky, to know, because it's a lunar calendar, and though people have worked it all out on the computer and have said, this is how it is, we know all of this scientifically today, they still, many of them like to see with their own eyes the new crescent and see that the month has begun. And so when you're sure it's going to start, the night before you go off with all the children to the Turkish bath and get everyone scrubbed up and really clean for the month of Ramadan. And so the month of Ramadan will last 29 days, and people will not eat in the day, but every night eat all sorts of special food. But it's a great month for going visiting. They love to have visitors to pass the evening hours. And so it's a good time to visit all your friends and enjoy all the Ramadan food. But if you have your period or a baby that month, then you can't fast. But the days that you don't fast, you have to make them up. You have to do them sometime in the next months before Ramadan comes again. How do Christians handle the fast? When I lived in the home, I made it clear that I wasn't fasting, but I didn't ask them to give me food during the day. I just waited to eat with them, but I might have had a coffee or something in the morning. One member of that family had become a Christian, and it was very important for me to be able to be a good example of what a Christian would do, because she was a Christian in a Muslim family. How could we show that, and what model a way she could handle Ramadan? But because I had other mission friends and Western friends in the city, she one day asked me if I ate when I went to their houses during Ramadan. And it was in my mind to do that, in a sense. I thought of that. If I don't eat here, there are plenty of places where I could eat. But then I thought of her, and I didn't eat. I fasted, more or less, but made it clear that I had no faith in the fast. And you would have the same question. A Christian woman would cook and prepare the fasting month for her husband, who is a Muslim, or a Muslim man would honor his Christian wife. By the way, different ways would take care of it to give a testimony, but it might be that you're fasting. One day we had a surprise with the young people who were Christians. They were talking, and a Muslim friend was with them, and he said, well, if you become a Christian, you never fast again. As a teenager to another teenager, I know he meant that, well, you don't keep Ramadan, you can eat all you want anytime you want because you're a Christian. We realized our discipleship was bad. We were not teaching the biblical fasting. Then women are involved in the tithing, but often not directly. But the tithe is 2.5% on the finances that you have, but it is also on the gold that you possess. And the woman's gold from her dowry is taxed in the tithing. I think today, in the situation, many more women go to Mecca and go on the Hajj than previously, as things have changed a great deal with transport where you go by plane. But she cannot go without her husband or a guardian, a person who will be responsible for her. And she doesn't wear any particular clothes the way the men have to wear. But she would wear just plain things, and she will not be veiled. Women do not veil at the Hajj. And a woman who's been on the Hajj is called Hajjah. And so I think the influences of how we live have a great effect on how Muslim women see us. Do we see ourselves as being able to influence and propagate Christianity and pass it on to other people? How would a Muslim woman describe your spiritual life?